Hello. Today's lecture is devoted to climate change and its significance for Russia. At the end of the 20th, beginning of the 21st century, the global scientific community agreed that there have been significant climate changes to consider. They affect social and economic development, food and energy security, crop yields, quality of life, population migration, and so on. Actual manifestations of climate change lead to significant increase of climate variability and extreme events in many regions. Dangerous weather phenomena observed during the last 2 decades proved to be more intense and destructive than ever. In this case, it is necessary to use large amounts of data on the climate system as a basis for intensifying actions on disaster risk reduction and adaptation. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change identified global key weather and climate risks. The following criteria have been used: large magnitude, high probability of impacts, terms of impacts, exposure to risk, limited capacity to mitigate risks. However, the concept of climate risk has not been defined clearly yet. Here we can talk about risk for a tornado. At the same time, we can talk about the risk of widespread destruction and buildings damaged due to a tornado. Others will assess mortality risks associated with building collapse or damage. 21st Conference of Parties of the United Nations, held in December 2015 in Paris, made achievement in adopting the goal to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees and to pursue efforts to limit warming to a 1.5 degrees. Under the Paris Agreement, climate action was anchored in the context of international law. This requires countries to make their own unique contribution to the prevention of dangerous climate change trends. The next step to follow this agreement is the implementation of concrete measures by the signatories to make their individual contribution to the global goal. In 2017, 51 countries ratified the Paris Agreement. So here you can see 9 regions with more or less similar climates that have been identified in Russia. According to Roshydromet, that's the Federal Service for Hydrometeorology, climate warming in Russia is about 2.5 times more intense than the average for the globe. Compared with the average global surface temperature from 1 to 1.5 degrees, a change from 10 to 15 degrees can sometimes occur. Predicting weather patterns for the coming month is becoming challenging. We could say that gradation and climate extremes is a fact. We can distinguish large space-time fluctuations in almost any season of the year. All-time cold and heat records are represented by dots on the map. Notable changes relate to precipitation, and heat records outnumber cold ones. Overall, in Russia, for the last 15 years period, annual rainfall rate is growing by 2% for 10 years. In spring, precipitation rates are increasing by about 6% for 10 years period. In Siberia, between 15 and 20% for the same period. The annual flow data for the largest rivers in Russia within the past 30 years are on average higher than in the preceding years. The main reasons for the increase of river runoff in winter at Siberia apparently are an increase in precipitation and an increase in the frequency of winter thaws. Biggest threat to the environment and human is not a warming trend, but climate change. In other words, climate imbalance. You see it on the slide. We observe surface temperatures records 5-10 times larger than rise in average global temperatures. Extreme climatic events is becoming a new dimension in climatology. Numerous examples range from abnormally cold or warm snaps in winter to exceptionally hot, dry, or rainy summers. Roshydromet has long been announcing a significant increase in the frequency of extreme climatic events. Intensification of weather extremes is currently emerging in Russia as one of the most important aspects of climate change. Here you see the total annual number of hydrometeorological hazards on the territory of Russia, which caused significant damage to the economy and population. The consolidation of the results obtained is presented on the integral map of the extreme natural phenomena. Analysis of climate change on the territory of Russia allows us to determine the aspects of adverse environment impact and to establish the areas where this impact is stronger. With sharply continental climate and a vast territory of Altai Krai, the climatic dependency of agriculture is of crucial importance. Models for climate change impacts on agriculture indicate that there will be increase in the heat supply of crops and in the duration of the growing season, increase in the average winter surface temperatures determining the conditions for overwintering of crops, and changes in moisture content, which are caused by an increase in precipitation during the cold period and a decrease in precipitation during the warm period of the year. This implies that the average July surface temperature in Altai Krai has increased by about 0.9 degrees and by 2 degrees for average annual temperature. The results of the conducted research indicate that for the last 15 years period, duration of the growing season has increased by 6 days. And the reduction of the winter period is observed in all agro-climatic areas of Altai Krai by 8 days on average. Here you can see a map with accumulated temperatures that exceed 10 degrees level during the growing season. Based upon the distribution of temperature, a contour line with a value of 2,500 degrees has been identified in the western part of Altai Krai. It was not found in the territory in the 20th century, while contour line with a value of 2,000 degrees has been shifted to the north and extended beyond the territory of Altai Krai. Thus, our intensification of high temperature gradient is currently emerging in Altai Krai. As noted in the second estimated report of Roshydromet in 2014, it is a favorable factor for agricultural production. This will also require new approaches to the agro-climatology study in Altai Krai. We should consider real-time boundaries of agro-climatic zones. Thus, agro-climatic zoning for crop planning needs to be revised and modified. New data will allow us more competently solve the problem of crop efficiency. Here we talk about hydrological hazards. The number of hydrological and meteorological hazards in Russia has been growing every year. As for Altai Krai territory, there is a tendency of progressive earlier ice breakup in lakes and rivers associated with climate warming. These floods have been caused by the earlier timing of the temperature rise over the freezing point. Over the past 15 years, cases of exceeding the critical level have increased dramatically. Ongoing climatic changes have resulted in a sharp rise in the number of hydrological hazards during the spring flood season and the formation of unique anomalous floods. The evidence you see on the pictures. A solid amount of research concepts have been developed on the analysis of external factors to global warming trend. The observed changes have been linked to human-induced warming, and there is a strong evidence that the observed global climate change is primarily the result of human emissions of greenhouse gases since the mid-20th century. The cumulative effect of other factors just slightly weakened the rise in temperature. In particular, according to the IPCC, there is no reason to consider the change in solar activity as the cause of the observed climate warming. Hypotheses on the dominant role of other natural climatic factors are not scientifically reliable, actually. Statistical analysis allowed us to detect the anthropogenic effect on both the temperature of the surface air and other characteristics of the climate system. The vertical temperature profile of the atmosphere, the frequency and intensity of climate extremes, the change in the temperature of the world ocean. Expected climate change. All modern climate models predict climate warming for Russia in the 21st century, well above average global warming. The biggest increase in surface temperature is expected in winter, of course, and it increases to the north, reaching its maximum values in Arctic region. In the 21st century in Russia, precipitation rates will rise. At that, the most significant increase is expected in winter. Geographical distributions of future changes in precipitation in winter and summer differ significantly. Continued and more dramatic changes in the climate on the territory of Russia during the 21st century are associated with an increase in precipitation rates, like heavy rains or snowfalls, an increase in the number of high-intensity floods, stormy winds, and frequent weather fluctuations. Here we proceed to conclusions. Since the mid-20th century, the main cause of the current global warming trend is human-induced warming, that is, expansion of the greenhouse effect. Observed impacts of global climate change affect natural and socio-economic systems. Changes in natural systems will continue and become even more apparent in the future, resulting in the degradation of agricultural productivity. Ecosystems are already responding to climate change. Adaptation measures announced to combat global warming should come in combination with minimizing anthropogenic impacts on climate system, and the delay with it will lead to reduction of opportunities. This is it. Thank you for attention.